Figure out how to make my computer work, right? And get the whole page on there. So what I'm going to talk about is about the Mississippi River, the upper Mississippi, and what is going on in our county regarding that. So I think I've came and I've spoken about the local water plan, and we've talked about watersheds and all of that kind of background, and the change from the agencies and the counties and the SWCDs from, oh, we're just going to talk about Long Lake, or we're going to talk from Highway 87 to Highway whatever, you know, that little stretch of the Straight River. We're only talking about little things. Now we've gone to watersheds, the whole basin that drains to like the Straight River or to the lake. So the whole emphasis has really changed and shifted. It's taken it off of, political boundaries. So Hubbard County is within three watersheds, three major watersheds. So it's the Upper Mississippi headwaters, Leech Lake River watershed, and the Crow Wing River watershed. The PCA started with, first was the Crow Wing River watershed, and that she showed the RAP, the Restoration and Protection strategy that came out of it. It's a 4-year process where they do very intensive monitoring for invertebrates, for water quality, for fish, for plants, for everything. And then at the end of the project, and the PCA has a 10-year thing where they go back and we'll revisit it. So the first one was done was the Crow Wing River. The Leech Lake River watershed just was completed. And Mississippi Headwaters is going to be completed hopefully by the end of this year, early next year. So, it's all of the research, all of the studies have been done. It's in the writing process right now. So we're kind of talking about it. And so just some of the things to think about, and these are things, and Gretchen covered it very well about things that you can do, but just to be aware and to know a lot of things. So this is on the PCA website, actually, that you can go there. And there's a handout that I have over on the table. And it's got PCA where you can go to it, and then it's also got my contact information on the very bottom of the first page. So, but up here, so we're looking at, if I don't lose it here, so we're looking, Mississippi starts Lake Itasca, goes to Bemidji, goes to Grand Rapids, then it comes around here, here's Brainerd, and then it goes on down St. Cloud into the Twin Cities. Now up here, the river's in great shape. The land use around here is mainly forested, lakes and wetlands. And the headwaters are actually an exceptional resource that should be protected. We've got some exceptional waters in the Mississippi headwaters. The Schoolcraft River is one of them. In the Leech Lake River, we've got another exceptional watershed, and that's the Bungashing Creek. And that means that it's got huge numbers and diversity of aquatic insects and fish. And so we need to protect that just to keep it in that very, very pristine, very healthy spot. So that's kind of another thing. Up here, it's mainly a protection strategy. They have found in the upper Mississippi that they're going to list 2 watersheds that are impaired, and that's Little Turtle Lake and Lake Irving. And Lake Irving is mainly where all of the water from Bemidji drains. And it's shallow. And so the nutrients go and run there. And so they're really working on things on how can we help and how can we fix that. So right now from Itasca to Grand Rapids, the river's in pretty good shape. From Grand Rapids down to Brainerd, it's fairly healthy. The river mostly meets the river life and recreation standards. River life means how many bugs, how many different kinds of fish, all that kind of stuff. And then from Brainerd to St. Cloud, swimmers and boaters beware. It fails the recreational standard. That means it's too high of nutrients in there to be considered safe for swimming and recreating it. Then from St. Cloud down to Dayton, the Crow River enters here and doubles the nutrient pollution in the Mississippi River. And then from Dayton to the Twin Cities, it fails the standards for It no longer meets the river life or recreation standards. Nutrient levels are high enough to cause algal blooms and other problems.
Can you describe where Dayton is?
I'm not exactly sure where Dayton is. I didn't even know.
Yeah,
South of
she
St.
knows.
Cloud.
Yeah.
I know.
Just on the other side of Rogers.
No, it's, you know how Hennepin County comes to a point at the top? That's Dayton.
Oh, see, I never even heard of Dayton before.
Yeah, it's just kind of
I've
across
heard
from
of it, I
Elk
just-
River.
Yeah. uh-huh.
Oh.
So just to kind of put things in perspective here for you, the Mississippi is the largest watershed there is. It's 1.2 million square miles. The Mississippi headwaters has 1,255,105 acres, and it's largely forested. So when you keep the ground covered, it helps keep it healthy. It helps all of the different ecosystems kind of work. It helps purify the water when it can filter. It helps draw nutrients up into the plants. There's 685 miles of streams, 180,375 acres of lakes. And the upper Mississippi, so that goes from Lake Itasca to, I think it's Grand Rapids, is 510 miles, and maybe a little further than that. And the basin drains 20,105 square miles. 44% of the land in this watershed is privately owned. And yeah, so the Grand Rapids is what they're considering the upper one. Yeah, let's see if I can do this. So there you can see down to the Twin Cities. So the big picture, these are kind of the northern section needs protection, where in the southern part it needs more restoration. It needs more help in fixing things that are not working, that are broken, that, you know, so, but up here it's a whole different kind of strategy, and there hasn't been a lot of work done on protection strategy. So when we're writing the watershed restoration and protection statistics or strategies, we're having to come up with new things on how can we protect things instead of restore things. Way cheaper to protect than it is to restore.
Do counties have zoning authority?
They do, but Hubbard County does not. They only have the shoreline management zone.
So you need to think about development when you're doing protection. And how do you do that kind of protection when there's development happening?
And
Isn't
another
there still
thing-
an Upper Mississippi Headwaters Board?
Yes, there is the Upper Mississippi Headwaters Board, but that's only a certain area right around the river. It's a certain distance away from the river.
Oh,
And
yes.
so in Hubbard,
Yes,
we
yeah.
caught one corner on this side and we catch the other corner in Hubbard on that side.
Yeah.
So a lot of what they do doesn't really affect Hubbard because we don't have a whole lot in that watershed, but they do have authority to do that.
I think it's important to point out that the county commissioners have left it to townships in Hubbard County to adopt ordinances. And I don't believe I don't even think there are 10 that have adopted, maybe
No,
3
some of
or
them
4.
have, but then they aren't the same
Yeah,
from township to township, and that's a problem too.
so it's, you know, it's that way. It's just to let the townships do it, and the townships are not encouraged or by their voters or whatever to do that, how important it is.
So land use and the tributaries have cumulative effects, and Gretchen talked about that. You know, the further down we go, the more tributaries that are coming in, especially like the Minnesota River, which got its name from the muddy water that's coming from it, and and in southern Minnesota, you know, all the agriculture that goes on there. And so there's a lot of runoff, there's a lot of contribution, sediments. Again, phosphorus and nitrates are the biggest culprits. And sediments too. So downstream from St. Cloud needs fixing too. So here we can show some pictures here. So phosphorus, nitrates, and sediments. And so low is the dark green, high is the red. So you can see areas here down around the cities that we're getting into some trouble here, you know, for different things. And so it's fairly good up here. But that doesn't mean that can't change. And so one of the issues that when we talked about zoning, and one of the issues that we had in Hubbard County just recently was the conversion from forested land, potlatch land that was being sold and being converted to agriculture, to irrigated row agriculture. And so that has really backed off and has really slowed down. So I don't think I've seen, well permits, because usually they come through our office and we have to write comments on them too. And I haven't seen that many coming through. So at one time there were 25 to 30 new wells going in, and they dropped that back to 5. So that was from RDO. But they're doing all sorts of different things too. They're promoting cover crops. They're really doing, they're specifically monitoring their fields. And so in this little portion of the field where you need a little more water, in this one we don't need any more nitrates over here. So they're really doing very complex, using computers in their tractors and stuff to put nitrates and stuff on and fertilizers. So these are all things that Gretchen has kind of talked about already, but things that are being done here. So we want to protect the good. So the Upper Mississippi is in excellent condition due mostly to the current landscape of the region. We've got fairly intact wetlands. That is a huge important factor too, is to keep those functioning correctly, have them not be filled in by sediments washing off of bare land. So keep those and keep the land covered with cover crops. You've seen, if you've all driven down Highway 87 in the winter, and if they don't have something or leave stubble or anything on the field, it's dust bowl. The wind is blowing and the dust is and that all runs off into the lowest point.
Can you speak a little bit to the no net loss of wetlands and how is that an adequate replacement for the wetlands that are being?
Okay, if you want to do something to a wetland, first you have to do an application. That comes to us. That's the SWCD office. And then we go out, determine what type of wetland it is. Different wetlands have different things that they can do on it and how much you can do. So it gets real complicated real quick. And so it depends on the wetland. Now, you have to prove that you're minimizing your impact to the wetland. And you have to prove, okay, minimization, and what's the other one? Now I forgot, blank. And avoid.
Mhm.
And avoid.
Yeah.
Avoid it if you can.
So, if you if you can, and so we will work with people to try. So if you've got only one spot where you can put your driveway, you make your driveway littler, thinner, not as wide. If you can't go anywhere else, you can't go anywhere else. So then you showed that you didn't try and minimize it. You can't avoid it, so you really don't have an option there. But then you go to replacements. And so you shouldn't be able to get to replacement. It's not easy to get to replacement because you have to minimize and you have to,
I always think of it as agricultural land or development that is the biggest deal. It's
No.
anybody.
I would say it's development and cabins and houses, really, is
Okay.
what we're seeing.
Okay.
And we're seeing an awful lot of, I've got this low spot and I want to fill it.
Yeah.
Because it's just a bother, it's wet in the spring, and it's wet up to my knees, but it dries up. So that's not a wetland, because it's not wet all year long. Well, yes it is, because there's 3 criteria we have to look at for wetlands. So it's the water and the type of plants, and then if there's redox that's happening, there's chemicals, things that are going on down there that show that it's a wetland. So we have to find out what kind of wetland it is, and some are more restrictive. So type 3, 4, 5, I think are more restrictive than a 1 or an 8 wetland. So, and there's all sorts of different, by the plants and everything else that grow in them.
How about frogs breeding in the area? Is that a criteria that
Frogs?
defines something as a wetland?
No, not really. Not that we use those 3 criteria that, for the water and the plants and what's going on in the soils.
In the metro area, they have to replace wetlands 2 to 1.
Yes, and so we're in our area, we're greater than 80% for wetlands.
80% of what?
Of our area is wetlands.
Okay.
So when you're into the cities where there aren't as many wetlands, they're way stricter. Usually, And the Corps of Engineers gets involved in this. So we have the Board of Water and Soil, we have Hubbard County, we have us, and the DNR. So when it comes to some of these, if it's a wetland that's within a public waterway, then the Corps of Engineers gets involved, and they're very strict. And then they can even ask for archaeological testing. They can, do all sorts of things depending on where it is, and so there's lots of things. It isn't just I want this, so I'm going to do this. People do, but then they get caught, and then they have to restore. And so we've done that. There was one gentleman that decided that he wanted to fill this wetland in front of his house, and he put in 36 truckloads of sand. And he drove in it and got his little Bobcat stuck because it was still so wet. So he had to take it all out then. And then he had to plant it. And then he's on 10 years for restoration. He's on the hook that if that should fail, he needs to replant. He needs to do everything to try and get that back the way it was. So you need to talk to the SWCD first if there's anything that you want to do in your wetland. We're seeing a lot of people that have a little wet spot. It's kind of filled in because that's what wetlands want to do. They want to get to the point where they're filled in and they'll become land eventually. And so that's just eutrophication, that's just aging of a wetland. But they want to dig it out because they want ducks and geese and wildlife. And so I had a gentleman just the other day called, I hope he isn't here, but and he wanted to do that, and then he wanted to clear everything totally around the shoreline down to nothing and put white crushed gravel all around it. And I said, you're not going to have ducks, you're not going to have wildlife. You may have geese, because they'll like that because they can walk up on your lawn, and then you're going to have a whole mess with the geese. But, so it's a lot of educational process that we have to go through. And so, we see a lot that, they can maybe excavate a little bit, but there's real rules on that too, that they can't go deeper than 6 feet, and they can't take so much out. And if you want to do a wildlife, area, or cattle, they say wildlife cattle watering, and I said, well, if you've got cattle coming in there, you're destroying the habitat for wildlife, so, anyway.
How often do you actually, how often is it reported to you that there has been an issue?
All the time.
And how does that get reported? Who reports?
Neighbor. Or
Okay,
somebody
so
driving
it is,
along.
because that's what we were told also by Environmental Services, that if people didn't report the problems, they wouldn't know about them and nothing would happen.
Unless we see, and a lot of times we have older aerial photography now, so it isn't as good, but a lot of times we'll be flipping through looking for something and we'll go, whoa, that isn't right, and then we'll go and investigate, and if they did it, we can still get them. And so once you do anything to your wetland, what you're allowed to do, you do the application, it gets approved or not approved, you change things to see if you can get it to go. Sometimes it'll be a no-go whatsoever. And then there isn't a fee for it to do that, but you have to go through the process. And then if you're in violation, then the conservation officers are called. They can issue a cease and desist order. Then you have to do replacement, and and it can go to court. And I haven't had one yet go to court, and I don't want to, but
It seems like talking about individuals coming to you and locally things being done is a different animal than the pollution control agency making certain recommendations which are based on science and so forth, versus a corporation that wants to do something that is very detrimental to the water quality, or could be detrimental. So it's like, how often does an agency make recommendations and have success in stopping, I just keep thinking about pipelines going under the Mississippi River, and
well, there's a
traversing
bill
the
in right
watershed.
now that are taking all those safeguards that were in place, taking them away. PUC doesn't even have to do it, and then that's a bill that's going through and that they can just do it.
Well, it just seems so
And see, so right now,
impossible if
there still are things in place, so the pipelines can go under utilities exemption. And that's what they're pulling on us right now, is they are changing it. They said, well, we're gonna do this, so you don't even have to come out and look at the wetlands, or, you know, that we're going under the Mississippi or the Strait or the, you know, the fish hook or any of
we're
those
going
things.
through wetlands
Oh,
that
yeah,
are
exactly.
inaccessible.
Exactly,
Should there
and
be a
they did,
future problem.
I think it was for the MinCan, when they came down, and it was actually over in Clearwater County, there was a huge wetland complex that they came through. But the time of year that they did it, it was actually bog, so they cut the peat out, and they cut it out and they put the pipeline in, but because of their timing, nothing grew back like it was supposed to. And so they pretty much, you know, destroyed that part of the bog. And so timing is really critical, and, you know, the time of year and what you do, and there's all sorts of different things. But
So, I actually have a couple of things. Seems to me when I used to drive around the prairie years ago, you maybe the map showed this. I mean, I agree that probably now it's development and not agriculture, where there's wetland loss. But it seems like
There's
there
both.
was
There's
before.
both. Yeah.
And then the other thing is this net loss thing, no net loss thing. If we lose, okay, so if you have a wetland, let's say you have a big wetland here and you're going to fill it in or whatever for ag or industry or whatever. And you so you have to put a wetland up in the northeast corner of the state. To me, that's nonsensical
No.
because for migratory purposes and for critters who live here and all those kinds of reasons and for our own clean water, it doesn't make sense to
And
me. Is that
nothing
still a
is
practice?
mitigated.
That's just the way that it's set up. We don't have any wetland banks in Hubbard County. So we have to actually go to Aiken County if we have replacements.
Wow.
Yeah, so, you know, that's all part of the whole process. And then they took the funding away to do any wetland banks, so they were totally closed. And I think ours, the Area 5, was the only wetland bank that was open. And then that was going to be because it was closed and they didn't have funding to pay for replacement credits. So for like township roads that have to do work. And but now they put funding back in, so, you know, hopefully that'll work.
And
So
then-
that,
Go ahead.
so that utility exemption, that is why the companies can go in and put a pipeline in without you looking at it. Has that been in place for long years?
It's
and years?
been there, but usually what they had to do is do a delineation, say exactly where the wetland was. Then the LGU, the local government unit, whoever does the Wetland Conservation Act, and sometimes it's the county, sometimes it's the SWCD, sometimes it's both. They would have to approve the delineation and say, yes, I agree that your lines are where you said they were and what kind of a wetland it is. We agree with that, or we don't agree with it, and so you have to redo it. So there was some,
Something, but not anymore.
well, the way it reads right now.
Oh.
So it depends what the governor does. If he,
After you
So
do
where
all
was
the-
that bog that you said did?
oh, I can't remember. It was someplace in Clearwater County, and I don't remember the name of it. So these are just, you know, some of the things that we need to do. Protect our drinking water quality. And, you know, that is an issue here in Hubbard County with the nitrates.
So
And
what's-
so,
Is it Park Rapids where you had the problems with potatoes, right?
Oh, yeah, well, the fields, well,
The fields.
they
No,
they
wasn't there-
can't identify any.
Oh, yeah, one time we had a very major problem.
Yeah, they had the potatoes stored in the hockey thing.
Sure, on the ground, on
remember
the
that,
ground.
yeah, right by the well.
Yeah, right by the well, yeah.
We now have how many,
New one.
$1.3 million
Water treatment.
water treatment that we as the
Right.
residents of Park Rapids pay for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what we
I mean,
wrote
it's
about in Des
amazing.
Moines.
But that's just to take out the iron and the manganese. Because they had to drill a new deeper well
Oh, okay.
to get, because they were mixing the water from
Yeah.
2 or 3 wells, and it was still over the standard.
Okay.
And now, the standard is still around 7. That's where it's sitting with the new well.
And that's just.
For nitrates or for,
nitrates.
yeah. And I was, when I
Yeah.
was looking at those statistics for holy Toledo.
And that's really interesting because when you were talking about the
Yeah.
birth defects and all those different things, because, the information that we're getting, the information that I've gotten from the Department of Ag for animals, because I was getting calls because the Department of Agriculture went and did around in the 6 townships. So it was Henrietta, I can't remember all of them,
Yeah.
2 up and then the 4 across the bottom. They went and tested all the wells, or at least how many people would return them, the samples. And so now it's the 2nd year of that, so wells that tested high, they're gonna go back and they're gonna actually take the sample because there's human error when it's just somebody goes in and, does it. So they're gonna redo it, check it and see what it is. And then they're going to, because of Straight River Groundwater Management Area, and with the trout stream and all of the concerns with that, then they may have to impose, first it's a voluntary for farmers to voluntarily reduce their nitrate, what they put on, but if it gets to the point that they don't do anything, then it'll become mandatory, and then they'll have, they'll have to have some teeth in it. So this is a process that's going on right now. Then also what the SWCD has done is we've completed our portion of the geologic atlas. So that's doing an inventory of all the wells all over the whole county. So then they get a picture, because they get all the well records, and they can tell, how deep they were, what they ran into, because it'll tell the different kinds of soils that it went through. And that's now in the DNR part, and then it'll go to the university to do their final, and we'll get maps showing where the aquifers are, what the aquifers are, how much are in there. And so that's going to be really, really important information for townships and for the county. If they want to do development, say Aquafina wants to come in and put a great big, water plant here. Is this the place you should put it, or should we put it over there? And so those kind of
Are
things.
you talking
I was
about
going to ask,
inventory of private wells?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. All the wells. So we got all the wells.
I wanted to ask about that, Aquafina. I mean, bottled water, people believe that bottled water is pure. There is no testing. No testing for the bottles, right? So we have no idea what it is that's in, at least with the city wells, they are tested.
They're
Right.
tested
But-
frequently too, and it
Yeah,
has to be
every
recorded
week,
and
yeah.
recorded. So
So, I mean, there's just really a sale of goods.
yeah, it's consumer beware. And we actually had one. It was Russ John's Root had gotten some. They were kind of promotional little bottles of water with their name or something on it for, I don't even remember what it was, if it was Pheasants Forever or something. But so he brought one of those in. It was testing 7 for nitrates.
I can believe that.
And it's like, whoa. So we've tested most of them that are here. We'll go out and go to Walmart and buy a couple and test them, and they've been good. They've been okay.
How,
So, you're talking about this survey that you did, and it's going to the state. When do they think that will be completed?
The geologic atlas.
The geologic atlas, it'll probably be a couple more years yet.
More years?
But at least it's done, it's completed, they've got the data, so it's progressing. And it takes, it took us a little bit longer to do it because the county wouldn't fund us to do it, so we had to come up with our own funding for it. And then, we did it, and then it takes a couple years for the DNR to go through and do their thing, and then it takes a couple years for the university to complete everything else, so. But it's coming.
how
Just so
about
you
the-
know, the state parks that are funded through the Legacy Act, so you can thank your sales tax dollars.
How about the water like at Hugo's, when you bring in your jugs, is that
Check it.
safer? I mean, or is that just the same
I
as-
don't know how often they clean their filters.
But how about
And I
the
don't know
nit-
about nitrates, I don't know.
So you don't know if it have nitrates in it?
It was probably just filtered
It's right
tap
out
water.
of the
Probably, and it's probably
So it
just
wouldn't
a
be any
filter
different
on it.
than what comes.
Come out of your faucet. You
Oh,
can come to my house and just
I
fill 'em
quit
up.
getting,
Yeah.
yeah, whatever.
But that is really, people believe that if
Oh,
it
yeah.
comes in a bottle, it's safe, but there's
And
no,
that's
it's,
No, there's no,
it's just,
Huh,
Safeguards
that's
on that,
interesting.
no.
There's a lot of people that buy
Loading up
water
on
like that because it's, it tastes better.
mhm,
So like, if you have really hard water, you might go buy water at Hugo's because it's not as hard,
mhm,
something like that.
mhm.
There's aesthetic
I,
value.
s- I still wonder, all the studies, all the reports, all the, the going up through the system to to wherever it's supposed to end up, if nobody up there is listening or giving any credence or just saying, oh, that's fake science, you know, I mean, it's like, how do you affect the people at the top that will fund or defund agencies and programs? How do you get them to listen to and study the science?
That's us.
Is it
Yeah.
by
Groundswell.
I don't know, what we've been trying to do is to flood places with contacts. And so I've gotten where every time I email my legislators, they email back and say, no, I'm not gonna quit. I don't know if they don't vote any different, so I feel frustrated too.
Well, sure, you do.
It-
But that's, you know, it's gotta be, you know, from the people. If we can't get their attention, you know, and then come cycle around for voting again, you know, next time around, it's like,
so
bye.
that is what it all ends up boiling down
Oh, I know,
Yeah.
and then, you know, it kinda happens the other way too, so, but,
I think part of our role as league is that, you know, that stink eye your mom gave you. You know, we're kind of there,
do the right
and we're
thing.
like, we're here, we're watching.
we're watching, yeah, and to let them know that you're watching, yeah. But so those are, you know, some of the things that we're concerned with in the area. So, talking about the buffers, you know, that's really, really important. And around lakes, and this is where I had a problem with the buffer law, Kentucky bluegrass is considered a buffer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When it's this tall and the roots are this
Amazing.
long. So, but that's considered a buffer. There's something there, it's not bare ground. So I didn't agree with that. But if you can put in native vegetation, their root systems are way longer, way bigger. They can handle the drought up here because they're, you know, native prairie stuff. You know, they can do a lot better with that.
What was your percent of buffer completion here?
For,
Your
Howard
buffer
County.
inventory, how much was?
we're about 98%. So there's, you know, a handful. We've got to go and look at a few, because of the aerial pictures that we were looking at. We couldn't see the actual shoreline.
Yeah.
And so if there were trees there, if there were leaves on or something, we couldn't see. So there's a few we're gonna have to check yet, but, you know, I know of maybe 10 that we have to do something with. So there's not a lot here in Hubbard County. Now, it's mainly southern Minnesota. I was just down in Mankato, and oh my gosh, what I was seeing down there was unbelievable. They were, you know, there was stuff planted along the sides of the drainage ditch that was corn and soybeans, and, you know, and the ditches have fallen in, and
Prices are really low now, and they were really high a while back.
yes.
So, for both reasons.
Yes, exactly. And so, you know, it's really important, you know, that we do the buffer. And then the other thing is the wildlife corridors. Because if you take all that cover away, the wildlife don't have a way to get to where they need to be. And so that was what was happening with converting from forested to, you know, irrigated row crop, is where are those deer going to go, especially in the Badura area, which was a great big wintering yard for deer. And then if they cut down all the forests, then where are the deer going to go? On the road, you're going to hit them.
Yeah.
Just with the compliance on the buffer law, how about other counties around here that are part of 2B, but not Hubbard County? What's the compliance like?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure
I'm
about
not sure
those
on that.
other areas?
And I'm not the one that's been doing the buffer law. It's our other employee, Jamin, has been doing that. So he would know. He knows the map a lot better than I do.
Okay.
But just in talking about it, and you know how much, you know, we're pretty protected. So, and usually we have big wetland complexes on either side. And we do have ditches in Hubbard County. Don't let anybody tell you we don't. We've got some judicial ditches, which usually come from one county and go into another. So we've got several of those. The county had said that they didn't have ditches, and I knew that they did. And we found them in a rusted shut file cabinet. And they heard something, and then they broke it open. And so I found plans. So like for the Necktie River was ditched in 1911. And I got the actual plans with the mimeograph paper or whatever in there, and they're held together with straight pins. It was really cool. It was really fun to find all this stuff. But you know, I've got the actual plans for the ditches, but they were supposed to be put in to drain the wetlands so they could farm. That was the main reason back then. And so the Fishhook Shell River from Highway 87 down to Twin Lake.
Yeah.
The people, actually the county said, no, we're not gonna ditch it, and the people went to the legislature and got them to ram it through, and they did it. And it never has really worked, and so now what's happening is there's such a huge sediment load. If you look at aerial photos, you can see the sediment coming down the river, and it's filling up Twin Lake just horribly. And so, you know, those are kind of on our radar to, you know, maybe try and restore something or restore parts of it, so both of those are, you know, kind of high priorities for us. But. So buffer strips really important. Changing crop practices, and we're really trying to do that. We're really, the SWCD had to focus, for a while it was mainly on lakes. That's kind of how everything went. First we started out more agriculture, then it kind of turned to more lakes, and now we're going back to agriculture, lakes, and forests. So they're, you know, they're all hand in hand. And, you know, we do a grazing workshop. There's other grazing workshops. There's irrigation workshops all over the place. We offer programs. We offer incentives for farmers. We've got in the Straight River Groundwater Management area, we've got a special grant that we're trying. If you've got high pressure irrigation, we'll change you to low pressure. If you need software for, you know, doing more precise programming for your irrigators, we'll do that. If you don't have irrigation scheduling, which is a person that goes out and actually tests the soil, keeps track of how much precipitation you get, keeps track of your crop and what growing stage it's in, you'll say, yeah, you need a little more, you know, water here. No, you're doing too much, or, you know, maybe you should side dress your crops right now, not do it all at once in the spring, have it rain, there's nothing growing, so it goes right down to the groundwater. So, you know, we're trying to change those practices. We're trying to go to no-till drills instead of, you know, back and forth across the field 5 times and making it black. And, you know, there's all sorts of things that we're trying to promote and trying to change, you know, perception and education. And, you know, there's some farmers that can't afford it. You know, the equipment is very expensive. But we're trying to offer things. So, another thing is stormwater. And Park Rapids is another example of that. All of the stormwater drains directly to the Fishhook River. Nothing in place, goes right to the Fishhook. We did get one storm scepter in when they did Riverside. We got what's called a downstream defender, and so the stormwater goes in there, it cycles around just from the water flowing in. It takes out the sediments, it takes out trash, it takes out oils, and that sort of thing, and then it goes into the Straight River. But, you know, there should be actually other things after that before it goes into the river, but they didn't have a lot of room, they didn't have a lot of money, but we did get one in. But, yeah.
How about, excuse me, how about the salt?
That's an issue.
It is an issue here.
Yes, it is an issue.
Salt.
Road salt.
Yep.
Okay.
Salt.
And
What-
sodium chloride in the summer.
Yeah. What attempts are made to change that? What can be done?
Well, there's other options that are available. They're probably more costly. So that would be talking to your townships and talking to the county about what they want to do. There
And the
was
city.
one study that they were using crushed glass instead of salt to help with roads. But, you know, there's all sorts of different things out there that they're doing,
Do
so.
they use brine here instead of salt?
Not so much.
In the Twin
In
Cities?
the Twin Cities, they do that
Yeah,
a
they've
lot.
switched to brine because it's more effective and you use less salt.
What is brine?
It's
Salt
water
water.
and salt. It's a slurry that they shoot on the.
Yeah,
Salt water, is
Yeah,
that brine?
yeah, but
But
it
it's
somehow,
less condensed.
yeah, it adheres
Less
to
concentrated.
the pavement better because
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be liquefied first.
Right.
So, what, there are a lot of roads that I see in my own township that have calcium chloride applied to keep the dust down, I
Yep.
guess, in the
And to
summer.
hold the road together, because, you know, our class 5 is really sand.
Mhm.
You know, in Indiana, in class 5 there, man, you drove on it 3 times, it got wet once, and it's like cement.
And these township roads are adjacent to our lakes.
They are. They're lakes and wetlands and everything else, and it can change the whole chemical composition of all those things and affect, you know, all
And
of
the
the.
alternative to calcium chloride might be watering? What can you
Sand.
do?
You know, sand's another one, but then you got the sediments going in.
Pavement.
And so, you know, there's different things out there, it's just that, you know, the county or the townships have to have the wherewithal and the funds to use alternative sources, so.
Is there a lot of awareness of that amongst township
I
and
think
county
it's,
officials?
I think there's getting to be a little more kickback from people. I know, like in White Oak where I live, you know, we're saying, no, please don't do that. I'd rather have the dust on the grass than, you know, do that. But, you know, they'll put another layer of gravel down and then they'll chloride it, because it's ruining our vehicles too. Cars have rusted out so fast.
Is there an agency or anyone that has to be conferred with when Potlatch sells their land, which is now Jack Pine Forest or whatever, to some other party, a private party? You can just demolish all the trees and not ask anybody
Unless there's an
whether that's
ordinance,
okay?
a zoning ordinance, then they can't. I mean, if it
But
has to
we don't
comply,
have a
but we
zoning
don't
ordinance
have.
unless
in
it's-
County.
Okay.
Unless if it's around a wetland, you know, we could
Yeah.
maybe do something about that. We've got one that we just
Or shoreline.
found out about that's getting he's getting slapped. So because he bulldozed right into wetlands, you know, he did all sorts of stuff, but, you know, no, they can just sell. And now what we're finding is that a lot of people are buying up the potlatch land. So now I've got 40 or 80 or 160 acres, now what do I do with it? So one thing that the SWCD is doing is that we have had a program called Tullabee Forest Stewardship. And so that was on 5 lakes in Hubbard County that have tullabee, which is a Cisco fish, which is a forage fish for, you know, most of the game species. And we're finding, like on Long Lake, that during the summer, because of the heavier rain events, the more frequent rain events, all the storm water going into the lakes, sediments, the temperature is climbing in the lake, and the oxygen is declining. So tullabees are like the canary in the coal mine, and they get squeezed. So we found that their area that they can live in, come August, is getting littler and littler. And so, like this last year, I think Cabacona saw some die-offs. I think it was Straight Lake over in Becker County saw some die-offs just because the conditions weren't right for the tullabees. So what we did then is within those 5 watersheds is we tried to get stewardship plans for how to manage your forests. And so we helped, you know, it's usually $250 for landowner pays. You get a stewardship plan written by a certified forester. And it can be, you know, you can harvest, you can do, you know, they wouldn't let them clear cut, but they would let them selective harvest, you know, make it a working forest. But then they've got plans for replanting and restoring it and keeping it so there's stuff on the ground. And so we wanted to expand that a little bit. So we've got a little bit of money that we're trying to expand that outside of the Tullabee lakes, but still in priority watersheds. So along the Straight River, along Necktie River, you know, some of those. So we're trying to do that to get some stewardship plans. But
Would that be something that LWV could help advocate for, is more funding for those kind of things?
sure,
Absolutely.
we could.
Because that's something that...
Because it was a program actually that came through the DNR, and the
Yeah.
legislature has cut, and actually how we got to this point was that the legislator cut a bunch of DNR foresters. They about halved them. And so nobody was there to go out and do it, and that's why they kind of got the SWCDs involved, is because they didn't have the legs on the ground to do it. And they got a little bit of funding to do it, that we could help get these stewardship plans. So if you get a stewardship plan, then you can go into easements, because you have to have that plan first that shows that you're managing your land. And then also you can go into other programs. So our forester, we contract with them, and he's a private forester, and he writes the plans. It's not recorded, it's registered. So the DNR has a register, so we know how many parcels, you know, have SFI or have plans on it. And then you can go into programs called like Sustainable Forestry Initiative. You can get a tax break on that, or incentive payment for it. Otherwise, there's 2C. That is a tax break for landowners, so that'll help, you know, with doing their forests. So if you know of anybody, send them our way, and we'll see if we can get them a stewardship plan. But
How large of a parcel?
20 acres or more is what we're requiring, but So let's kind of keep going through this. So we kind of talked about, the big bad boys. So phosphorus, bacteria, nitrates, and sediments. And then increased flow and runoff with the changing weather patterns. And then you can see kind of in the picture with the, I think that's bass, I can't even tell what it is, and crappie. And you know how green it is. We had a real bloom on Lake Plantagenet this last year. It was a perfect storm, and it was pea green.
Ooh.
And that was just because of all of the runoff, because of the temperature, because of just everything kind of was right. We had a huge algae bloom. And we've actually seen, there's the blue-green algae, which can be toxic, but now we're seeing red algae blooms. And so that's on a couple of area lakes too. So there's stuff going out there. There's always work to do. So, what are things that you guys can do? You tell me. What can you do? As just a little old person that owns land in Hubbard County. Are there things that you can do?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think about the need to talk about these kinds of things with our neighbors, with friends, make the awareness much greater and more personal. But then, even though our legislators may not be responsive, still keep hammering away.
Yes.
Keep them advised that indeed, you're watching, that you care.
And then come at them with information, not just, the histrionics and that kind of stuff. You have to prove to them. And you have to educate them too. So
we also have to start talking to future legislatures in the primary process before that general election. And there's not many people that participate in that level.
no. But when you do having your meet and greet here's and asking them questions, that's really important. And having the papers here to cover that and get that information out, because I learned a lot.
And
So,
we try to get the right questions asked.
Yeah. But things that you can do, do the native buffers, use the native plants, protect wetlands, don't fill them, keep the land covered. Really make sure that if you do fertilize your lawn, it's phosphate free. So there's 3 numbers. So like 16, the middle one should be 0. It's by law it should be 0, and then there's usually another number.
And don't cut so short.
Don't cut so short.
Don't cut some places at all.
Exactly.
Make
Let
a
it go
smaller
there.
lawn rather
Yep.
than a larger one.
I spend a lot of time not cutting.
That's right. But then they come back with this firewise and say, well, you need this break around your house.
Yeah.
Darn.
But there's a break around the house that,
Yeah.
it really,
Yeah, I know.
man.
Is
The
that
stormwater on your property, are you guttered? Does your house have gutters? Does it go to rain barrels that you can reuse? Or does it go to a rain garden or a sediment basin where it can sit and soak and go back into the ground instead of just running off? Inspect and pump your septic systems. That's very important.
Move into town.
No.
Attend community input meetings. So there will be some more Mississippi Headwaters meetings, and part of the whole RAP process was civic engagement, was getting people involved and getting their opinions. You know what's in your neighborhood better than we do. And so to hear things from you, because Sharon was at one, were you up at that one in Bemidji? Yeah.
So was Tony.
And then there's other watersheds. Yes, we're talking about the Mississippi, and most of you don't live in that watershed, but you're in Crow Wing or you're in the Leech Lake River watershed. So, there's other watersheds out there. And, if people have questions, send them our way. That's what we're here for. So we're here to kind of be, the SWCD is here to kind of be the go-between between the agencies and the public, and to help them explain things to them, and we're kind of the boots on the ground. We like to do the projects where the county is not able to do that. They're more the regulatory and taxing and that, and the SWCD is here to do the projects. Thank you. Lots of questions,
Yeah.
good discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Look at this 8 o'clock.